achiever, restorative, learner, focus, and futuristic. My name is Sarah Maloney, and I'm head of operations at REI Game Changers. My biggest aha moment around learning my strengths was just how accurate it was and helping me understand how to better communicate with my team and tap into my strengths better.
I'm Darren Verisami.
I'm Brandon Miller.
And this is the Strengths Whisperer. On this episode, we have Sarah Maloney, the head of operations at REI Game Changers. Sarah, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited for this.
Now, Sarah, you're joining us from across the proverbial pond known as the Atlantic Ocean. You're in the UK, right?
Yeah, I'm based in London in the UK. I'm from Ireland, so if you hear the accent, that's where that's coming from.
We get to hear strengths whispered in an Irish accent. That's going to be that much cooler for all of our listeners. I'm really excited about us. So Sarah and I, everybody, we're actually in a mastermind group with Cameron Harold called the COO Alliance, and we're actually accountability partners. And we've had the chance to connect over the past year and a half. And I've just personally been thoroughly impressed with Sarah's focus on people and growing teams and how that comes together in operationalizing a business from the COO chair. So it's been really cool to go through. Now, Sarah, you took the assessment tail end of last year, and we had a preliminary walkthrough of your strengths. Were there any in your top 10 when you saw them that really jumped out at you as like, wow, that is totally me? Or what does that even mean?
For me, when I got it back, it was like everything just got super clear. I was like, that's why I'm the way I am, or that's why I understand things better than the CEO will understand things, or that's why we get frustrated between each other because I can see it so clearly and he can't. So for me, it was actually super accurate, which was scary at the same time. But the achiever was my first one, and that resonated a ton for me. Sometimes I can almost need to get frustrated with myself because I just can't stop wanting to like do more, be busier, take more tasks off. So getting that validation of that can be a strength too was awesome. They were all super, super accurate, but that one really stood out to how I operate.
I think what's really interesting in what you just shared that's really important is when you took it, it made elements of how you lead and how you work very clear. And this is a really important point that Sarah's just brought to light. It also illuminated frustrations, why we might get frustrated, why things that seem really clear to us might not be clear to others. Were there some of your strengths that when you saw them, you were like, I didn't even know that could be a talent. I just figured everybody operates like that. Were there any ahas that came out like that? Because that sometimes is one of the hugest ahas that people can have around taking their StrengthsFinder assessment. Did you have any of those that jumped out where you had that kind of aha, Sarah?
It was actually the fifth one, the futuristic, because in all my roles, I've worked closely with the CEO, one-on-one with the CEO. Now I understand why, because she's talking about the idea and I can just visualize it. I can see it. I can go through the steps of how we're going to get there. How do I always end up working so closely with the CEOs? Because that's in the top 5 of one of my strengths. And then I also get excited about it. So it makes me want to work closely with the CEO because I want to get closer to the vision. I want to be a part of the vision. I want to make an impact on the vision. And I think that's what's helped me be in this head of operations role, is because I'm the one that needs to make it happen. And if I have a clear vision of the vision that he's spoken about and I can communicate that with the team, I think that makes everything flow a lot easier as well.
Yeah, what's really unique and important about what you just said, Sarah, is for you, futuristic, you're able to see the vision of the future of what it means, and you can see the steps on how to get there. Now, the interesting part in that statement is futuristic on its own actually does not see the steps. It's the surrounding strengths that you bring. You talked about that achiever. Sarah is loaded with executing strengths. So as a director of operations and somebody that needs to execute and get things done in her role, she's got achiever, restorative, focus, responsibility, and discipline in her top 10. All of those are right there in the top 10, are executing strengths. And these are strengths that know how to make things happen. So when there's that futuristic guidepost It's able to see the vision. It's able to see what the future could be. And interestingly enough, even though it falls in what's called the strategic thinking domain of strengths, in many ways, it can actually serve to influence people to action because it can paint the picture of what could be, get people excited about that vision. Those 5 executing strengths are the ones that are able to be clear. That's what the end game looks like. And they're the ones that naturally step into place to start creating the path on how to execute. Those strengths, the executing strengths, sometimes can be the blueprint domain, meaning we take the blueprint from the architects, the engineers, and construction, and then they're the ones that are going to go out and take the blueprints and build it into reality. That combination has been part of your success strategy in this particular role. Is that a fair assessment in terms of how we put those together?
Absolutely. And that's why when I got it back, it was like a blueprint of this now makes sense of why I'm built the way I am or how this works together. I think you mentioned as well on one of our calls that we had where it can also sometimes be a weakness because the CEO might be talking about his vision and I'm immediately, okay, step by step. Sometimes it's just him verbally just talking about his vision. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to do that. So that helped a ton because then it helped me differentiate between, okay, it's a strength, but I also need to know when to use it, when to back up a little bit and make it even a greater strength if I can adapt it depending on the situation.
And Sarah, one of the things that you're sharing there really illuminates needs that our strengths have. So with 5 of your top 10 being in the executing domain, there's this need to have steps. What are the steps to now make this a reality? So that we can do what? Contribute and deliver. Naturally, our strengths, what they tell us is not only what our talents are. When we really think about it from a tactical level, on an organizational level, they're going to tell us how we're going to contribute. So when we think of these executing strengths, there's going to be this natural bent towards contributing, getting things completed, getting things done, moving things forward, advancing the building process. But to do that, we need to have clarity as to what are the steps. What are the structures? What are my operating parameters in going through? If we're talking to somebody, as you mentioned, like your CEO might just be spitballing, as we like to say, some ideas, some perspectives. Maybe he's got these influencing strengths like significance, communication, self-assurance, competition, command. These are all influencing strengths. This is interesting. One of their needs is to do what's called verbally processing, meaning they talk to think. So they need to talk it out to paint the ideas. And when an executor is hearing that, they're saying, that's a great idea. Hey, just shut up, stop talking, and tell me what we need to do, because I don't need 4 more ideas. We need to just pick one of the first 3 ones. They're great. And that's not what's necessarily going on for some of these influencing strengths, because they need the ability to actually talk it out. And a helpful technique, Sarah, in working through that, just for you as a tactic and for any of our listeners that might have identified, ooh, maybe I work with somebody. Maybe somebody that I report to is more of a verbal processor that they need to talk to think, or maybe somebody's a direct report of mine really needs to talk and it feels like they might just need to talk it out. Ask them, do you talk to think, or are you talking to think? So in those meetings that you're having with your CEO, a really helpful technique is just saying, do I need to plan on executing on any of these? Or are we just talking ideas out? And that will give you the clue as to how you need to show up. And it can tell those executing strengths how they need to execute. And what it might be is just sit back and listen and go through and then see the different variations of the painting that futuristic will come up with, or analytical will come up with. Because futuristic is seeing possibilities and analytical is going to see more of the realities. And that allows you to call in the strengths that might be needed to advance one of those ideas or go down the path of forward playing what 6 different directions or ideas that were laid out on the table could look like. Does that make sense, Sarah?
Yeah, I love that because I think we both appreciate that, because I probably wouldn't spend time thinking through it, what's the steps, and then get on the second meeting next week and it's like, oh no, that was just me thinking through ideas. And I'm like, I thought that was a plan. So I think both of us would appreciate that and probably save a ton of time when we're talking or he's thinking through his ideas or talking them out loud.
I got to share the story with you because it's perfectly relevant. And I think it makes a lot of things come together for many of our listeners as well. So when Brandon, my business partner and CEO of 34 Strong, when we first started working together, now at the time of this recording, about 10 years ago in 2013, he's a high influencer. So a lot of his top 10 are influencing strengths. So if you look at his strengths profile, it looks like he's competing with the sun because those influencing strengths are like orange. And it's like, are there any influencing strengths that you don't have in your top 10? He's like, there's one that's 11 or 12. So he's got them all within his top 15. And the interesting thing there is when I had taken the Strengths Finder in 2012, I was still in construction, Sarah. So I had just taken it. We were starting the company. And like you, I had those same 5 executing strengths, except for I didn't have restorative. I had a ranger instead of restorative, but I had achiever, focus, responsibility, discipline, and a ranger in my top 10. So when we were starting the company in startup mode, we'd have these conversations and we'd go through the influencing strengths. When they're not even trying to influence you, they speak with such energy, even if they think they've turned the volume down to like level 2 out of 10. So I'd go and then I'd come back and we'd meet 2 or 3 days later and I would have laid out a plan of we could do this. Here's the steps. Here's the structure that we want to get to. Because that's, again, how my natural strengths would show up to contribute. Keep in mind, I had 10 years in construction. So it was always about execute, get it done. So it was not only my wiring, my DNA, but also the environment, the nurture that I had, and the type of business I had been in. That was what it was all about. We'd get back to the table, Sarah, like 3 or 4 days later. I've laid this out. I've done it. And he'd say, why'd you do all that? What'd you do that? I don't think we should do that. And I'm thinking, why did we talk about all this? Because to me, if you're going to talk about something, you're going to do it. To me, in 2013, 2014, now I totally understand the value of playing out some of the different ideas, coming up with different scenarios, because you're going through the thought exercise of stretching the thinking, and it opens up our minds to what could be, not just executing for the sake of executing. And yeah, we got it done, but now we have to go back and do it again and moving through some of those ideas. So there's this blend and this understanding, but when we can speak those different levels and understand those different perspectives, it can be really, really beneficial. How has that awareness shifted your ability to really work together, to advance, to connect with each other since you've gone through this process and this awareness in the past couple months?
For me, it was because I don't think I was able to communicate well before I got the clarity of this is what it actually looks like. This is what it means. This is how it looks in the workplace, personally. So getting that back and being able to better communicate that to the CEO, I even sent him my Strengths Finder to be like, this is how I operate. This is why sometimes I do what I do. And that just opened up a great conversation to just discuss it. Okay, so when I do this, like, what do you normally do? What do you prefer to do? And it just created a really, really great dialogue between us that then helped us get better on the same page. Then, like you said earlier, are you verbally processing now? And just quick little things like that to understand each other better, that then nearly merged our strengths together better because we understood how to use each other's strengths to move things forward, to make things better, to get more clarity between us. And if we had more clarity between us, then coming to the team below us and the team management and then passing that to the front line, they had clearer communication because we were communicating better. We understood each other better. So that then just trickled the whole way down. That was huge. It just created such an open dialogue between us and being able to understand each other better and working through that.
And that's a big part of what it is. And here's the thing that's interesting. You're on the front end of this. It's kind of like to live a healthy life and to create healthy culture, much the same. We have to keep repeating certain things. Sarah, you've got a really strong fitness background. Like you've done a lot in the gym space, in the exercise, health, and well-being. Wouldn't it be nice if on the 2nd of January, we could just go to the gym, do a really kick butt workout, eat healthy on January 2nd, and then just go drink beer and do whatever we want for the rest of the year and then be really healthy? Wouldn't that be cool? But it doesn't work like that, right? What has to happen for us to physically maintain our health? If we're exercising, we're training. You've had a lot of time in that space. You used to work for a fitness company previously, right?
Yeah, I was working in a online coaching fitness company. We were helping females lose weight or gain muscle. And then we had a Fit Pro thing as well to help PTs get online. But I was also doing bodybuilding at the time. So like rigorous diet. And that's where I think the achiever came in. I think that was really nurtured from early days doing bodybuilding because you have to have a lot of discipline. I think that's my 10th one. That definitely resonated there with the personal stuff that I was doing.
Yeah. And the habits that we had to have is how we create it. But part of the habit is we got to keep repeating it. And strengths, interestingly enough, the conversations that we have, that front end dialogue that we might have with our CEO or our teams, and as it ripples through organizations and we start looking at each other through the lens of strengths, it's not just a one-off, we check the box, we got it done, we crossed it off the list. It becomes a habit. And we start actually folding in different elements to keep our awareness alive and our education alive, not only growing our self-awareness, but the real power of strengths is the team awareness side. And I know you've started that with your CEO with kind of going along, but as we become more aware of how they operate, guess what it gives us insights into? More awareness into how we operate. Now, this is a really interesting point. We always talk about this through a strengths lens. How do you move from frustration to fascination? Frustration, Sarah, interestingly enough, is oftentimes a tell of our strengths. Let's say futuristic sees the vision and those executing strengths see the path and all the steps that we need to do. And then we're frustrated. What do you mean you can't see that this is what we need to do? This is the structure that we need to create. Because discipline can very naturally see a big project and then be able to break it down into the 10 micro projects that it needs to be. So naturally, it's able to do that at a speed that's way faster than others. Here's the thing about strengths that's really interesting. It's not that others can't get to where we're at with whatever our strengths are or won't arrive thinking that we have or create that structure. What it is where do we start? So you start naturally by seeing the vision of what it is and then are able to go right to what are the steps to actually make that a reality. And you will do that first and foremost, top of mind. Now we have that. Who are the people that need to come into play to make this reality? If somebody's leading with different domains where they're stronger on relationship building strengths first, they might get to the execution points that you have, but they're going to go the opposite way. They're going to say, okay, yeah, I have futuristic, and then they had 5 relationship building towns. Who are the people that I need to involve to make this vision a reality? Then I'm going to map out the steps on how to get there. So we can sit there debating about which way is right. And the interesting thing is, through the vision of our strengths, that's going to guide us to where we start and what we bring to the table first. Sometimes those frustrations are not necessarily that others can't see it. It's just we see it at such a level of speed, it actually can be an opening to say, well, what are you seeing? So those frustrating moments might actually be a great way to call a timeout and say, well, what are your strengths seeing? If you know somebody else's Clifton Strengths profile, and if you don't, we might be able to ask that in different ways, saying, what are you seeing in the moment as the areas of importance? Tell me a little bit more about why. Sarah, I'm really seeing the people needs. Tell me more about what you're seeing. And you might start finding that together, you balance each other out really well. That yin and yang component. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think it gives a great opportunity to be able to look into each individual's lens, because you could put on their pair of glasses and they see it completely different to my pair of glasses. And I always say, anytime I have like a collaborative meeting, we're trying to get to an end goal, we're trying to figure out how to get there, I'll always say, like, it's not about who is right, it's what it's right. Being able to go, hey, what is your perspective? What glasses are you looking this through? Helps, I think, to get us to the right outcome that the company needs, the business needs, the clients need, the people need. I think can be a massive strength if you have the patience to allow that conversation and use other people to collaborate together and get to the end goal.
Very much so. I want to share with you in terms of what is right, what is the right outcome that we're aiming at, because that's an important anchor point to know that we're not battling individually with each other. We're passionately discussing to get to the best outcome for the company. And it actually is an environment that helps us to remove our egos. Patrick Lencioni has written the book, The Ideal Team Player, and he talks about being humble, hungry, people smart is what he's talking about. If you haven't read that book and you're looking to understand how to hire and recruit ideal team players, it's absolutely magnificent. It's brilliant. The framework is so simple, but yet so important. But I talk about that because when you lay out a process like what you talked about, where, hey, we're all in this to bring forward the best outcome. And we know that each person is here showing up that way. Are we assuming the best in everybody by stepping into conversations like that and a culture like that, Sarah? Or are we assuming the worst in everybody, that people are just here to win for themselves? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, if you have the right people, anytime a new person comes into the company, they know what our mission is and what our core values are. I'll always assume that it's the best.
And when we lead with a notion like that, laying the groundwork in our culture that we are all here committed to bringing the best outcome, it removes the barrier more so over time with the right people. That creates that strengths-based culture of, hey, you know what? You were here and you're going to have the floor. You're going to get to say what you have to say. Even if I'm not agreeing that's the best way, I respect your perspective as a colleague. I understand where your strengths are showing up and what's going through. And here's some other ways that we could look at this and build from this. 2 techniques in that space, Sarah, since you brought this up, that we've seen within our work and that we've folded into our culture at 34 Strong that have been phenomenal. 2 really simple things. Number 1, say and instead of but. So if you say, that's a great idea, but immediately when you say but, you've negated how good that idea is. Immediately, you've shut that person down. So if we say, that's a great idea, and I wonder if we added this on, what that would look like. If you say, that's a great idea, but I wonder if we added this on, immediately it's changed the reception of it. And the second part of that statement is the words, I wonder. Because if we state, I wonder if, or I wonder, we're asking people to kind of walk down a thinking path with us. I wonder what this would look like if we went this way. Not, you need to do this, you need to go through. If we're looking for more of that collaborative place, it brings us together. So those pieces help create an environment where we can passionately put ideas on the table, go through, and be able to advance ideas in a very collaborative way, but not be in a place where people are feeling defeated or my idea was right, yours was wrong, I didn't get my way. What have been some of the ways that you've created success in those types of collaborations, Sarah, that you've found to be really beneficial?
When I start any of those meetings when we're collaborating, because we're an entire virtual team, I'll always set the expectations first of like, we're all here to get to this outcome. And I want everybody's feedback because each individual on this call, like the reason why I have you here is because I appreciate your feedback. You can add value to this meeting and I want to hear from everybody. And I think giving them all that opportunity to voice their idea, whether at the end of it all, we take it or not, they've been able to give their thoughts, their opinion. It's been appreciated. We've recognized it. It may not be a now thing. It could be, let's pin it and we'll reroute and come back to it later. And I think people want 3 things is to be heard, to be challenged, and then rewarded. And I think that gives them an opportunity to be heard. And for me, if someone did give me an idea and I'm wondering if it's the right thing, I'll always ask, like, just help me understand why you're thinking it this way or what brought you to that thought or that idea. Rather than, no, why would you even do it that way? It's more like, just help me understand how you got there. It keeps encouraging them to continue to give feedback. They don't feel like they just got shut down and they're scared to go again and mention something else.
That's right. And your analytical strength with number 8, that has a natural ability to just peel back the layers of the onion and ask why, to get to that clarity of why did we do it this way? And I love the way that you frame that I'm just asking why to understand your thinking and your logic and going through. One of the watchouts with analytical, even in its brilliance of being able to keep asking the why, is sometimes unintentionally, it can put people on defense because it's saying, why? And they're like, why are you grilling me? And you're just saying, I just want to understand the thinking and the framework that went into this because that's going to help me better understand the process. So sometimes when we lead exactly like you did, Sarah, with just sharing the intention of the question, it disarms some of the pieces. And those are the subtle tactics that we can get into that are not only important for effective communication, but actually really important for playing to our strengths and validating our strengths and validating others' strengths. So it's in the way that we communicate, very similar to what you just shared. We're communicating, not that I disagree with you or anything. We're just saying, hey, I value you and I actually want to understand your thinking process of what goes into this and how your brain works so I can better operate with you, not only on this project, but in stuff that we're doing together in the future. So there's that way to step into that. But it all ties back to when we're taking a strengths-based approach to developing our team to working effectively, we have to lead with positive intent. And that's that belief that you're not here to sabotage. You're not here to win against me or win against you. We are on the same team and we're working to win together. And some of the stuff that we put out there is going to be great. Some of it's not going to work, but that's okay. We want to encourage, keep putting it out there so we can get to the best outcome that maybe we don't even see right now. But when we mash up some of these ideas and perspectives together, we can get there. One of your unique super talents, number 10, discipline. First, let me say 3 of your strengths, Sarah, are very rare to have in the top 10. Focus, significance, and discipline. With 30 million people having taken the assessment, those are often found. If we took the average of everybody that's taken it, we would find that those are most frequently in the bottom 5, so in the 30 through 34 positions. So having them in the top 10 is very unique. Now, discipline specifically is a really important one to hit. As I mentioned earlier, discipline is naturally able to take things that like one big project and see how it breaks down into all these micro projects. Discipline often really does not like disorder and chaos. And if you look in Sarah's background, which I can see, it's very orderly. And I've gathered that from you and talking with you over the past year. Discipline, again, does not love chaos. But interestingly enough, when structure needs to be established, it understands how to keep doing a little bit of work and making the progress and getting things a little bit better until we create order, structure, and systems. And it understands, and it naturally does that. When we were talking about the frustration and fascination side, Sarah, because that comes so naturally to you, that can be a frustrating point. Like, you just have to do this. You just break it down into these micro projects. And when we think about things, we were talking about health and fitness and dieting and this, and what's one thing that we need to have to do it? Discipline. What's one thing that we know from a Clifton Strengths standpoint that many people don't have, that they have really low? Discipline. So the fact that you have it really high and the ability to do that and see a project through the multiple sub-projects that it is and creating timelines like, hey, here's what we want to do. We want to be at this point in this milestone by 2 weeks out from now. That's very natural in the thinking of discipline. And here's the thing, a lot of people don't have that talent. So it's one of the reasons oftentimes that people may gravitate towards you, because that's something that you bring, but that's also going to be something when we have these rarer talents that people will really value, but they also haven't been around and communicated with as many people that have it, because it's just such a rare talent in the information that we have on those that have taken it now. So it's really interesting. Is that something that does seem to come natural to you, where you can see the big picture and then drill it down and break it apart into its smaller pieces and get there, and you naturally move in that direction?
Yeah, and I think I also need to be aware of it, because I want to talk that through with my CEO. Like, yeah, I see the many steps, and this is exactly how we're going to get there. And he doesn't want to go there. But I also think it's a strength that sometimes can become a weakness that I have to be aware of, because sometimes I can go so granular that I forget to zoom in and then zoom out. Are all my steps lining up to the outcome? Because I can get so zoned in and break it down into the weeny steps that maybe sometimes don't even matter to the grand scheme of things. I think I have to consistently go, when was the last time I zoomed out? Where am I going with this? Is it productive now? Is it helping the other people to understand where we're going? Sometimes I have to be aware of potentially slipping into a weakness or not so much of a strength.
Yeah, you are highlighting a very important point. And I think it's very much in alignment with one of the pieces we want to talk about today as well. The core values that are intrinsic to your culture that has grown is extreme ownership. And that means that it's not only the ownership of the projects, the tasks of what we've done. We have to own how our talents can serve us really well and how they can get us into trouble. That's part of ownership. That's that accountability side of taking responsibility for our actions and owning that. And what you just shared, Sarah, is really important, because when we think of strengths, it's easy to get caught in the narrative that, oh, we just focus on what's right and pretend that these weaknesses don't matter. Actually, taking on a strengths-based perspective is you own where you shine and you own where you're blind. So you own your blind spots as much as you own the areas where you shine and that few can hold a candle to you. And when we can look in the mirror and when we can make statements like you just talked about, that awareness that's there of, ooh, am I going too deep into that? just growing through that. When I talked about the repetition, that going to the gym, if you will, it's actually pulse checking regularly and say, okay, discipline's on overdrive right now. Is that the strength that I really need to be using right now? Or do I need to actually call in futuristic and analytical and step into those places and pull them up? Does my learner need to go to town and just open up the perspective of what others are needing right now and really leveraging those strengths to go to the people, connect with them in different ways? So it's a way to make sure that we can calibrate these strengths, because that's an important part. It's not just having the strengths, it's how do we effectively calibrate them, because we don't want to overuse or underuse them, but it's a constant component that we're going through. The analogy I love to use, Sarah, you ever driven a vehicle that's been out of alignment? So like your steering wheel is turned to the right and that's how you're driving straight, right? Like it's hit too many bumps, too many potholes, and it's out of alignment. The vehicle can continue driving like that, but we know we're overusing one side of the vehicle, underusing it, and that's going to cause intrinsic damage if we don't get it realigned. And our strengths, similar to our bodies, of how we might need to get our spine realigned, we might need to stretch, our vehicle might need to get realigned. That's exactly how our strengths work, because we can overuse some of them because of the situations that we've been in. It's on us, though, to start developing that muscle of just pausing and saying, what am I using right now? What should I be using right now? And then getting to the point where we can ask that of our team. Are we too laser focused on this one strength or these strengths? You've done great. You've delivered. Let me actually see what your futuristic thinks. Let me see what your significance has to bring into this conversation. And just asking those questions and calling those out in team members, asking that of ourselves, can help bring things up in a way that can be really valuable.
Yeah, and I think that makes the strengths even more powerful, that you have the self-awareness to be able to tap into each one, or which one am I leaning too far into? Is this the right situation to be using this strength in? I think that's something I can improve on, and I think that would just increase the power of these.
That's exactly it. It's just asking the question of just saying, how am I driving? What should be driving right now? What's needed when I'm looking out ahead at my week? What are the strengths that might best serve me in these different situations, or allow me to serve others best in these situations? I want to change gears because it's building off of that notion of extreme ownership with the example that you gave of how discipline can be really beneficial, but also get us into trouble. I know at REI Game Changers, you have grown a culture of extreme ownership. There's a great book on that by ex-Navy SEAL Jocko Willink, who's very well known, and he talks about it in the Special Operations Forces and how it was used when he was a Navy SEAL. But whether you served in uniform or didn't, the principles that he talks about in there and the point that he's trying to make, there's a lot that can be applied into our culture. How's that been going from an application standpoint, and how's that been cultivated into your own personal growth and into what we were talking about earlier, team awareness and team growth for your culture?
I think it's made us be able to move a lot faster, because there's no stopping to point fingers of who did what, who made the mistake. I'm taking ownership over this. I'm going to look at what went wrong on my end. Let's move on. And that's helped speed up a lot of our projects, a lot of the goals that we've been able to achieve, because we're all just looking internally. And then the CEO obviously is super potent with that. It makes everybody else appreciate that when he makes a mistake, he owns up to it. And it makes everybody else feel like it's okay to make a mistake. Failures are our mentors. They teach us stuff if we can extract the lessons from them. And I think that makes that okay in the culture, which I massively appreciate, because we're not a culture where it's like, you can't make mistakes because I'm going to make a mistake. The CEO is going to make a mistake. And that's how we learn. That's how we move forward. So I think for us, that culture that we've been able to inject into our people has moved us faster than I think we ever thought we could. And new people coming in as well, there's a very clear expectation of like, how does this extreme ownership show up as a behavior inside? Like, what does it look like? So they have a tangible association between like, here's the core value we have, but what does that look like inside the company? What metric does that align with that core value as well? Particularly in our sales team, because there'll be a lot of sales stuff going on there, and then being able to just take quick extreme ownership over stuff is just being able to move things forward a lot quicker.
Extreme ownership, own your stuff. For your culture, it's helped you to move faster. Wow, you talked about gold nuggets that you've gotten from listening to other episodes of this podcast. You just dropped one. Failure is our mentor. There's the old acronym for FAIL, which stands for First Attempt in Learning. And I live by that. That's a motto as a fellow learner like you. That's a part of your culture. And that is just really incredibly powerful. That's the ripple of extreme ownership. And when we are taking a strengths-based approach to development and looking at our team, that's exactly what we're talking about as well on the people side of our own talents, of who we are. We know, again, where they're going to help us thrive and where they might help cause us to have some pitfalls. But when we can openly own those failures, it can actually open up others to be able to step in when we're in those situations. It actually can reveal, who should I talk to next time that I'm going to be in this? I should probably get Sarah's perspective before jumping the gun on this, because she's going to bring valuable insight. And then we're going to move faster. So it actually serves to reveal the right teams to do things forward. And then when you have strengths as a foundation, you can actually see that, you understand that, you have a common language. It really opens up the door to be able to go further faster. And that's really powerful. Sarah, we could keep chatting for a long time, but believe it or not, it's time for us to go. I really want to thank you, Sarah, for joining us and sharing your story of being a people-first leader. And for our listeners out there, are you ready to discover your strengths to accelerate into life like Sarah has? We believe in this path so much, we're offering our listeners the opportunity to discover their top 5 Clifton strengths. And all you have to do is email us at Brandon, Brandon, at 34strong.com with the subject line top 5 to request your Strengths Finder code. Now, Sarah, if people wanted to learn more about you, about REI Game Changers, connect with you after this episode, what would be the best way for them to do that?
So we have a website for REI Game Changers, www.reigamechangers.com. So you can check us out there. And then for me personally, I'm big on Facebook is my main thing. So Sarah Maloney, Moloney. That's a very Irish last name.
Excellent. We will have those links on there. They can find you on LinkedIn as well. On that note, believe it or not, our time has come to leave. So, Sarah, I just want to thank you so much again for your time today, for sharing your insights. It has been an excellent conversation as always. And dear listener, I want to thank you so much for joining us on the Strengths Whisper. We will see you soon.